So the first thing we did with Nesta was kind of scope out what extreme collaboration meant. And so the idea we pitched was, can we have an intellectual soup kitchen? So then the question Nesta asked us was, is this something that's based on a personal chemistry between two people, or is it something that can be systemized and taken out to many institutions?
I think with any university, given that universities are so large, the possibility of that existing is there. It's just a matter of outing it and giving it its time. And sometimes you have to earmark that out off curriculum and off the natural timeline of a university year, if you like, in order to find out that those people actually do have something in common.
Deep down inside, I know that the science I do, whilst it's important to me, doesn't really reach a lot of people. And the skills we have could be used in so many different ways. So I'm trying to encourage my colleagues out of their ivory tower and into the real world of societal issues.
We looked at the notion of philanthropy and academia and how to kind of make that work. And really, it was all down to personalities and the force of the bond that Helen, Tony and I had forged at that point, which gave us confidence to kind of go forward and gather more people together.
We do have lots and lots of amazing minds around all these institutions, but they don't really have the time to get together. So as I understand it, that's where the free radical ethos came from. I was never sure, and that's probably my fault, whether it was setting out to solve a challenge, but I don't think it was. And in actual fact, I think if it had tried to do that, it would have wasted an awful lot of thoughts and ideas that have come from other people.
Okay, well, this is good then. So I was hoping that we'd set some hairs running today, which we have done, right? And that we'll self-assemble into a couple of groups to progress those, right? And we need some time next time we meet to report back on that progress.
So people help people, and my sense was that we quickly worked out who the people were who could affect other people's participation, I think. And that was one of the first things we did, was I think we kind of isolated one or two people in the group who had the capacity to bring other people in by the power of their brains and the power of their personality.
And then a similar day to today, but on a new subject, and then set another couple of hairs running. Because, they're not all gonna arrive at a destination.
I think that when I said I was getting bored was when you start turning ideas necessarily into outputs or mechanisms, and I think you need that, because otherwise the whole thing's completely always up in the air. But it's a balance between actually having enough space just to think outside the box, but also enough impetus that something's going to happen at the other end. If all the focus is on what happens at the other end, it just becomes another research project, as it were. If the focus is all just on then you sort of get frustrated.
It's a bit like those guys who do Shakespeare in 90 seconds. You could actually, where they kind of distill Shakespeare down. If you gave me an hour and a half, I could probably do a script where I went, that was a key moment, that was a key moment, and here was the tragedy, and here was the comedy, and here was the humour, and here was where we worked out what we were going to do. You could kind of distill it out into by the time you get to Act 4, you kind of pretty much know what you're going to do. But there's a heck of a lot of ebbing and flowing that goes on before you get to that point. So I think the key collaborative moments have been in the blink of an eye. And I think you picked up on that on the phone when we've been talking. And if you can find that channel, a collective channel to kind of push people towards a common point, you kind of start to make progress. And I'm sure, there's been about 5 or 6 points. But my God, it's a big job to kind of get people to those points.
Is this effectively the fourth meeting, if I'm correct? So, as a group, what we're actually saying is we're trying to strive now with some form of action point that is going to take us forward, but we know not what. We've got all sorts of ideas of interdisciplinary activities with students. We've got ideas, but we haven't actually got a real nail that we can hammer.
One of the difficulties was that I think people who work in education need to be philosophical about working in education. Helen and I guess, are all about action. So some of the academics are also all about action. So it was a question of kind of clashing them together and getting something that would mean that we'd actually made some progress.
I think all of us have excess intellectual capacity. Yep. Whereas, and interesting, particularly in academia, a lot of the structures of academia actually surprisingly shut down that capacity, or they channel it. So if you're doing a research project, in a way you don't want to have too many ideas, because you're answering a research question, and at the end of it, you're having an output which you've told the research council that's what you're going to do. So actually, you're sort of channeling your intellectual capacity and in a strange way limiting it.
I think what Free Radicals has highlighted are really the structural ingredients that you require in order to embark on such an adventure. And I think we've learned a lot of things that you need. For instance, you have to establish trust, ownership, listening skills above all.
It's just that very obvious thing of having time and space to think. And that because it doesn't have defined outcomes, it means that you can think in a more lateral manner.
There's still a massive part of me that kind of, even today, I wanted to sort of shake them and go, so what's the idea going to be? What's the idea? How are we going to kind of really push forward practical ideas?
It's been an experiment, I suppose, in whether the kind of kismet that happened when Tony and I met was a replicatable thing, and whether other people could also strike up their own relationships that would have a value to adding something, a value to the world, if you like, through their own ideas. And as far as I can tell, that has also happened, though actually quite quietly. But for me, that means that it stands a better chance of being sustainable, because something authentic has been struck between two people.
I've learned to work with the group, but I'm still more impatient than they are.
My concern was that it was personal chemistry.
And what do you think? Was that concern?
Yeah.
Okay.
But what the process has allowed us to do is find many other persons with some kind of chemistry, some kind of personal chemistry. So I think we have absolutely grown the team, right? And it's not for some people and it is for others.